Good morning, beer fans and beer makers. Yesterday, I boiled up a kit that I bought from Beer, and More Beer. It's their Christmas ale. I bought it back in October. It's March 12th. It's been sitting in my fridge all that time. So has the yeast I bought, White Labs WLP001 California Ale. When you let a yeast sit around for too long, the chances are it could die. And I was concerned that the yeast sitting in my fridge all this time might have lost some of its potency. So I made a starter. I made a half-gallon starter. I put about 8 ounces of dried malt extract to each liter of water. I boiled that up and I put it into my half-gallon jug. I did this all, by the way, per MrMalty.com. Check out the link below. I let it sit on my desk in my den here, which is nice and warm, and let it grow. Sure enough, the yeast worked just fine, and not only that, it propagated quite nicely. I had a nice thin layer of that creamy yeast sitting at the bottom of the jug by the time I was ready to pitch yesterday. Dead on perfect. I'd made the brew, and the original gravity is supposed to be between 1065 and 1070. And in my case, the original gravity is 1071. Now, the reason that we care about the gravity, if you don't know, is because that tells us how much sugar is in the wort, and therefore how much food the yeast has to eat. The yeast will eat that sugar, and as it does so, it will convert it to alcohol. So knowing what the original gravity is allows us to kind of take a guess at what the final alcohol count will be, because I'm assuming the final gravity is going to be somewhere around, in my case, it's usually around 1020. So that's going to give us probably a 6-7% ale, which is quite nice. I just wanted to show you, though, what the results of a starter are when you use it to propagate your yeast and pitch it into your beer, into your wort. Because a lot of folks kind of question this, and they think that just grabbing one of those vials of White Labs or one of those packets from Y Yeast will just allow you to go ahead and go. And for the most part it will. Except for you're kind of stressing out the yeast when you do that. You want to make sure that you have plenty of yeast when you start. If you underpitch, you can create certain problems. You can have attenuation problems where you still have a lot of sweetness left over in the beer. You can get some off flavors. That kind of sulfury smell you sometimes get is often the result of not having enough yeast in your beer when you started. Certainly the yeast you put in there is going to grow, but you really want it to have as best a start as humanly possible, or as yeastily possible, I guess. And so that's what a starter will allow you to do. So check out what's going on in my fermenter right now. This is my fermentation setup. You can see I've got a blow-off tube, and it blew off really well. And that's why. Look at all of that beautiful activity. Now, this is just the yeast putting out CO2, and it's creating foam on the top. And you can see the particulate matter. That's just cold break and hot break and big old chunks of yeast floating around, and it's being tossed all over the place thanks to the vigorous activity. The starter ensures that your yeast get a good foothold as soon as you pitch it into your cooled wort. And there's the result. That's CO2 coming out of the blowout tube. You could probably get away with using a bubbler on top, but I wouldn't. So it goes from my fermenter, and you can see the blowout tube is full of yeast and some hops and some trub and what have you. And it goes right into that jug, which is actually filled with sanitized water. And now, nice creamy yeast at the bottom. So as you can see, it's a nice, beautiful, violent ferment right now. Lots and lots of bubbles coming up, lots of CO2 going out. And I expect that this will probably be done fermenting, hopefully by next weekend. And that way I can put it in my keg, let it sit for a little while, age in a bulk environment for just long enough to get off any kind of off flavors, although it is fermenting at a really nice temperature and everything's working out just fine. If you have any more questions about doing a yeast starter, which I highly recommend you try, I've now done it twice, and it's really made a big difference in the beers I've brewed. Check out www.MrMalty.com. It's run by a guy named Jamil Zainashev. Really great guy, super, super knowledgeable, and a terrific resource. Thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate it, and keep on reading Rob Z's Brew Blog.